Guten Erev Shabbos. We're talking about a house of cards, the house of heresy, the house that modern thinkers use to tear down the belief systems of religious people, especially those who believe in the Bible. The reason they are able to do so is because they go around in white suits, white frocks, under the label of science, touting that all that they're interested in is the pursuit of truth. And we, the bearded ones, the ones that wear kippot and tzitzit and venerate ancient scrolls, are people who are backwards. We are supporting an ancient doctrine. I once wrote a letter giving my opinion about people giving birth for others who can't conceive or can't give birth, surrogate motherhood. And I pointed out that there were not just problems, but that ultimately it couldn't work. A contract is a contract, yes, but a mother remains a mother, and ultimately there would be difficulty enforcing it. Even if there's no difficulty enforcing it, there would be lawsuits and lawsuits and lawsuits, because you couldn't get the issue of the mother. Then there are other issues. The issue of whether the birth mother is the one who gave the seed or the one in whose womb it was born. It's an argument in the Talmud. Then the question is, if the birth mother or if the mother who gave the seed is not Jewish, then the child wouldn't be Jewish or may not be Jewish. And all of these questions complicate this issue. So I was a person who supported an ancient doctrine. That was the headline of the Jewish News in Detroit. I saw questions and doubt when others saw resolutions in a modern world. The person writing it made no logical sense at all, except that this was convenient. And since it was convenient, it should be supported. Just because something is convenient doesn't make it right, and doesn't mean it has no problems. Motherhood should be sacrosanct. And just thinking and wishing something to be because you want it to be that way doesn't make it correct. But what do I want to talk about now? One of the letters that the Rebbe wrote was a letter that he wrote to a scientist in 1962 concerning the age of the Earth, or the age of the universe. Now, you all know that scientists today say that the universe is approximately 13.7 billion years old, and there seems to be no Torah source supporting that idea, although there are. One particular source is Rabbi Yitzchak of Akko, who is a 13th century Kabbalist, who writes that based upon the writing of a certain verse in Genesis, one can postulate the actual age of the world, of the universe, as close to 15.4 billion years. Well, that's close to 13.7. That's right. Isn't that great? Hooray! Rabbi Isaac of Akko had a good guess. Actually, more than a good guess. The space of the universe, I know now that they have a different estimation, but the space of the universe is said to be 30 billion light years from one end to the other, and expanding. If that's the case, then how could the universe be only 13.7 billion years? If it's going 13.7 years this way, it's only 27.4 billion years in size. How does it get the other 10 or 12%? But if it's 15.4 billion, then it's 30 billion plus in size. It's going at the speed of light and expanding at the speed of light. It's going from here, 15 this way, 15 that way. That's 30. And that makes sense according to Rebbe but doesn't make sense according to the modern cosmologists. And they have to do mumbo jumbo to explain how the universe can go faster, expand faster than light. Light is supposed to be the limits of the conditions of the universe. And even though they theorize that there's certain particles that are faster than light, but it's only slightly faster. This would have to be 10%, that space would be moving 10% faster than the universe, than light, and that seems to be very difficult to understand. But if you believe Rabbi Isaac Kavako, then you have an explanation that's clear. So they asked the Rebbe, but you, Rebbe, say that the world was only 5,722 years. How does that explain? How do you deal with the cosmologists who claim billions of years? So the Rebbe focused on one of the ways in which you determine the age of something. And he says the age of something you determine by radioisotopic percentages. In other words, right now, if you have something that's made of carbon, that has carbon in it, it will have a certain percentage of carbon-14 within it. There's carbon is usually, the weight of, the atomic weight of carbon is usually 12. There are sometimes, through cosmic ray bombardments, there will be carbon that will weigh 14 in the atomic weight. So there's a certain percentages of, based on, you can observe it, there's a certain percentage of carbon-14 to carbon-12 in everything that's living now. But when it gets buried and the cosmic rays aren't bombarding, then the carbon-14 will disintegrate through its radioactive process. And in the course of a certain number of years, it's I think over 2,800 years, whatever it may be, it has a half-life, approximately 2,800 years or so. And every 2,800 years, it will lose half of the carbon-14s, something like that. So you can estimate the age of something based upon, if it has carbon, based upon how much of the carbon-14 is left. If it has a half, then it's 2,800. If it's a quarter, it's 56, and so on and so forth. That's how they determine the age of something that's buried. How do you determine the age of something that's not carbon? They have other isotopes, radioisotopes, that have a certain period of half-life, and through that they can determine the half-life of that particular radioisotope, and that will determine the age of that particular thing. And that's how, using radioisotopes, using radioactive materials, the percentages of lead versus uranium and ores, or thorium, those are the things that they use to determine how old the stratas of the Earth are, based upon how much radioactive stuff is left, using those isotopes. So the Rebbe focused on the isotopes, and he said, listen, the isotopes work now according to a certain periodic plan. It will lose a certain amount at a certain cadence, at a certain rate, a certain ratio. But you don't know what happened in the past. Perhaps there were different conditions in the past, especially when you have creation. When you have creation, you have different temperatures, different pressures, the presence of different catalysts or catalyzers, the Rebbe called them. And that will make a change in the rate of the deterioration of the radioisotopic material, and that it will not be good data because you don't know the other factors surrounding it. I don't know what happened with that scientist, whether he accepted the Rebbe's words, but the Rebbe was saying that temperature, pressure, and catalysts would cause a change in the ratio of the radioactive erosion of something that's very stable, which is the carbon molecule, carbon atom, and other radioisotopic materials as well, changing the temperature, pressure, and catalysts in the air or in the mix would change the ratio. Now, I was at that time, when I read this letter, I was translating it for a student in a Hebrew, an Israeli religious Zionist school. This was around the time of Shavuos, and he asked me to translate it for him because I had studied some sciences and I knew English, and he understood English, but he wanted me to explain it to him. So I read the Rebbe's letter, and to a certain degree, I was incredulous. The reason being is I thought myself to be a student of science. I had been told or read in a textbook that even if an atom would be the size of a basketball, this size, you couldn't see the nucleus or the electrons. You couldn't get past the electrons, they were too strong. You would have to have the pressure of a star to be able to break down the power of the electrons to get to the nucleus, but you couldn't even see the nucleus without a microscope. That's how tiny the nucleus is. The protons and the neutrons that we were shown, the little balls. Of course, now they have more sophisticated way of expressing them, but in my days, 55 years ago, they showed them as little balls in a nucleus. And they showed the electrons going around as little balls, little moons going around the Earth, the center of the atom. At any rate, I could not believe that the Rebbe was saying this, because to be able to penetrate the electronic cloud would require extremely great pressure that's only found in the center of something like a sun or a star. And the heat in that pressure would be millions and millions of degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius. And that doesn't exist in our surface. Even if you had a temperature of 5,000 degrees with a few higher atmospheric pressures, that wouldn't cause the breakdown of the electronic cloud. Catalysts, furthermore, deal with a chemical reaction, speed up a chemical reaction. Chemical reactions are effective only on the electron cloud that surrounds the atom or the molecule. So how, through pressures and temperatures, variations and the variations of different catalysts, can you break this down to cause a fluctuation in the nucleus that is so tiny relative to the size of the atom itself? I thought this is impossible. 9 years I had this question. In 1970 or 71, I don't remember if it was 70 or 71. Sorry, 7 years I had the question. I walked down the street. My colleague, Rabbi Kasriel Brusawankin, should live and be well, Funaventura, Florida, says, Chaim Moshe, they just had a terrific article in the New York Times about radioisotopes. I bought a New York Times, and sure enough, a group of scientists from Stanford University in California, Palo Alto, had done testing. And lo and behold, under different temperatures, pressures, and catalysts, the results of the radioisotopic erosion were markedly changed, exactly as the Lubavitcher Rebbe had predicted 9 years earlier. Now, I had that article in my files. I probably still have it somewhere in my files. I don't know how to get it. We have thousands and thousands of files over the years, and I don't know where to access. Maybe I might have even thrown it out. I went looking for that article. I could not find it. It's no longer in the files of the New York Times. You're welcome to look for it, because I tried looking for it. Maybe there's somebody out there that remembers that study and that article. I actually went to Stanford University's archives to try to locate that study. I couldn't find that study. Well, what does that tell you? Oh, this was published in the New York Times. I saw it with my own eyes. I was a skeptic. The scientists were told this is impossible. And the physicists who did the study said, but we saw it, and we made the calculations and the results. We see it, no question about it. So what is going on? No article, no mention of this study can you find in any textbook. The scientific orthodoxy is such that anything that does not fit in with their preconceived notions is never mentioned again. I don't believe there's another study about this idea that under different pressures, temperatures, and catalysts, radioisotopic erosion would change. Why isn't it there? There's only one answer. They want you to believe in the scientific orthodoxy about the age of the universe. If you believe that the earth is more than 6,000 years, the world is more than 6,000 years, there are places in the Torah that can tell you better than the cosmologists. As I told you, Rabbi Isaac Kavako has it at 15.3 something, almost 15.4 billion years, and the universe is a little bit over 30 billion light years in size, which would indicate that it went 15 point this way, 15 point something this way. It's about 30 billion years. But if it's only 13.7, you're missing over 3 billion, almost 3 billion years. How does that happen? Another card falling down in your house of cards.